Hey folks, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Natasha and I do book things here. So today's video is another Stephen King Sunday, and in this video I'm going to be reviewing Salem's Lot, which is Stephen King's second work. For those of you who might be new to my channel, I am reading Stephen King's work in publication order, starting with, Carrie, Salem's Lot, working my way down. Finished Salem's Lot a couple of weeks ago, actually, around mid-February, but it's just taken me some time to sit down and actually film this video. So my first review for Carrie, you guys seem to really like the format, so I'm going to continue that format where I'm going to talk to you guys about my past experience with the book, anything that I may have known about the book before reading it. Then I will go over my fun facts. I love learning where an author's mind was. I love learning like influences for writing the book. Then I will get into a general overview, and then I will go into my more spoiler-filled discussion for the book. So I do hope you guys like that format. It seemed to have worked really well for Carrie. I love doing research for books for like the fun facts and stuff. So for Salem's Lot, I definitely thought I had read this in high school. Turns out I was completely wrong by that. I started reading it and I was like, this is not a book that I have read before. I was going into this completely blind, basically. I knew generally what the book was about. This is a book about vampires. It is like a vampire novel. So that was pretty much all I knew. I knew vampires, small town, and I knew that a lot of people said that I would like this book. So that's kind of where my knowledge of it completely ended, and then I just kind of went into it and ended up loving it. I have, a whole like list of little notes here, and I'm gonna tell you guys some fun facts about Stephen King writing this book. So Salem's Lot was his second major published novel. It is a long book. It's definitely a lot longer than Carrie. My version here has about 740 pages. And so, coming from a book like Carrie, which was like 220, I think, pages, so there's definitely a difference there. So when Stephen King started writing this, he was a teacher, and he was teaching a fantasy and sci-fi literature course, I believe, for like a high school, and he made the students read Dracula, and he does include in the back of this book a little bit of a discussion about what Dracula means to him, because obviously it opens up a lot of discussion about vampires, and that sort of like jump-started him thinking about vampires and all that stuff. I'm just going to read a couple things out of the back of this and just sort of paraphrase it, because I highlighted a bunch of stuff and I thought it was interesting. And there's this really cute story where he talks about his mother, and his mother used to go to the library and get him and his brother books, and she would kind of say like about different things that he wanted to read, and she'd be like, oh, that's trash, but it didn't actually like stop them from reading it, or like she never just stopped them from reading something, which I thought was really interesting. But she would sort of just say like, oh, that's trash. He sort of discusses different levels of what his mom would consider trash, and there was like trash and then bad trash and serious trash and stuff like that. But his mom never described Dracula as any sort of trash. So he asked his mom to pick up Dracula, and she got it and said, you might not like it, it looks like nothing but letters. And so he started reading it, and Dracula is told in sort of like a different format, like letters and notes and stuff like that. You can tell that it sort of influenced even his first novel with Carrie, being told from like a detective's view and like a case file and like different perspectives. So like he actually really liked that format, and it continued on into his later work. So he says that he thinks Dracula was actually his first satisfying adult novel that he ever read, which again obviously influenced Salem's Lot. So that was sort of his introduction to Dracula, into vampires. He went on to say that he liked various vampires at the time, like different comics and stuff, and was scared by certain ones and whatever. But when he was 24, he ended up teaching that class, and he made his students reread Dracula, and it sort of just brought up the discussion of vampires again. And he had a discussion with Tabitha, his wife, all about like, what if Dracula were to come back in the 20th century, what would that look like? And she said, oh well, he probably would be dropped off in New York and get hit by a taxi cab, which I find kind of funny. And so she invited the idea of like, well, what if it was set in a small town? And then, Dracula being set in a small town and that kind of thing played a lot with the ideas for Salem's Lot, where vampires do come to a small town and what that looks like. So Tabitha said, what if he came here to Maine? What if he came to the country? After all, isn't that where his castle was, in the Transylvanian countryside? And he said that's really all that it took. He's like, I saw how such a man, such a thing, could operate with lethal ease in a small town. The locals would be very similar to the peasants he had known and ruled back home. It's just, I love learning stuff like that, like where his mind was at, and I just love it. It's just fun. So he started writing it, and it was originally titled The Second Coming, which Tabitha said that sounds like way too much like a porno, and so they changed it to Jerusalem's Lot. Then his publishers said that sounds too much like a religious novel, so that's when it was shortened to Salem's Lot, which, you know, the people in the book do go back and say that's a short form for Jerusalem's Lot, so it's not like that whole title was completely dismissed. Definitely touched on as to why it was shortened to Salem's Lot, but it makes more sense from a publishing standpoint to have it be Salem's Lot, so that's kind of interesting. He's also been quoted as saying he kind of wanted it to be a mix between like Dracula and Tales of the Crypt and also be sort of an all-American novel. He has been quoted as saying that this is one of his favorite novels because of what it says about small towns, and he says that small towns are sort of a dying organism and it sort of has like a down-home feel to him, and that this is one of the good ones, so he actually really likes it, and he says, I have a special place in my cold heart for this novel. I think knowing that and knowing that Stephen King really likes this, like that's just, it's nice to know that, and it's kind of a fun fact. He also tried in this novel to really plot it out. He said he really wanted the story to just be plotted, and he got stuck and let the characters sort of develop on their own, and the ending of the novel is not entirely what he had plotted out. I forget there's a term, and I'm sure Julie would know, and I'm sure a lot of the authors, an author tube that knows will know what that's called, where you don't plot a novel, you kind of just like let the characters grow and develop on their own, and that's what happened with Salem's Lot, and I think that works really well for the novel. So he finished it, he wrote it, and when he was sort of publishing it, they said, you know, you're going to get typecast as like a horror writer, and he's like, I don't really care. He had a $550,000 contract for the publishing of this novel, so second novel, homeboy's making some bank. This is amazing, seeing as he was probably like in his mid to late 20s when he finally like got published. I think he was probably like 25, 26. That's like an insane amount of money, so okay, Stephen King, sign me up. But during the time that he wrote this, his mother unfortunately did pass away. It says, the woman who brought me Dracula from the Stratford Public Library never saw Salem's Lot. By the time the first draft was completed, she was too ill to read much. She who read with such enjoyment over the course of her life, and by the time it was published, she was dead. If she had read it, I like to think that she would have finished the last 100 pages in one of her marathon chain-smoking readathons, then laughed, put it aside, and pronounced it trash, but maybe not bad trash. So yeah, that's kind of emotional. I don't know, I kind of read that and sort of just kind of laughed because it was just, you know, this sort of connection to his mom. So that's a few fun facts about Salem's Lot. I'm now going to get into the general overview and my rating for the novel. So as I mentioned, Salem's Lot is obviously a vampire novel, and it is set in a small town. It's set in Jerusalem's Lot, Maine. A lot of Stephen King's novels are set in Maine. There's Derry, Maine, where it is set, and a lot of other things are set. So a lot of them are set in this small town, Maine, which is something that I've noticed from his work is where his writing shines. Stephen King shines incredibly at writing small towns, and this one is amazing for that. Yeah, so if you are from a small town or you like small towns, this is great, and I'll sort of discuss more about that. So it follows the main character, Ben Mears, who is a writer. Main character does appear in a lot of King's novels as well, but he's a writer who's returning to his small town, and he is trying to write the story about an event that happened in his childhood, about this house that affected him in his childhood called the Marston House, and basically an event happened there that sort of traumatized him as a child, and then now that he's older, he wants to return to that house, stay in the small town for a little bit, and write his novel about that experience. So from there, Ben is writing and talking to townsfolk and making his sort of like friends and close-knit cast of characters. Is the events that take place to where strangers move into town, and the townspeople talking about them, some strange things happen, and it turns out vampires. That is pretty much all that I can say without giving too much away. So that's kind of the overview of the novel without giving any spoilers whatsoever. It's small town vampires. That's pretty much all you have to say about Salem's Lot. So this has been my favorite Stephen King work that I've read so far, and I freaking loved it. A lot of people think that this novel is a slow build, and it definitely is, but I love world building, but I don't like world building where it's just an info dump. If it's a fantasy world, I can't really keep track, but that's not what this is. It's small town, you have, you know, really, really likable characters, you have really unlikable characters, you have ones that matter to the main plot line and ones that like don't, but all of them combined paints this picture in your mind of this like just small town. Like, you know where people's houses are, you know where the stores are, you know where the Marston house is, you know where the inn is, you know certain people and certain people's characteristics, so that when shit finally does start to go down, you already have an idea of, oh, I wonder what's going to happen to this person over there, and this person, and this person, and their child. You know, like, it's, you care and you invest not only in one character that you're following, but everyone in the town. So yeah, I loved it, and I gave it 5 stars, and it was really fun. I will say that this is not a novel that is super scary. I find that vampires to us now are not a threat. They're not freaky, they're not as scary as they might have been in the mid-70s, but if you are kind of hesitant because you might be scared by it, this isn't one of his more scary works, in my opinion. It's more suspenseful and fun. I think it's kind of fun. I think it was kind of fun. I didn't get scared by this, but I was definitely thrilled to see like what was going to happen to the characters. So yeah, I do highly suggest this. 5 out of 5. And then from there I am going to get into more of the discussion and spoilers. So if you don't want to get spoiled to anything that happens in this book, end it now. And I will see you guys in my next video. So all of the spoiler-free overview kind of gives you the basis of what this book's about. There's more to discuss, but I find that this is a book that you want to read and just enjoy and not necessarily know what happened. So the vampires do come to town, and they do move into the Marston house, which is the house that haunted Ben as a kid. And so obviously he's kind of like, okay, whatever. And it's set up for like majority of the novel. You don't really realize that they're vampires at first. You know, some weird shit goes down, some kids goes missing, you know, some like ritualistic sort of things happen. I love the sort of talk about like satanic panic, where they're thinking that it's like satanic rituals that happen. They kind of are, but it is the sort of like vampires rituals. I found that just really fun to read. I just love how everything felt like a natural progression. Nothing felt like it was just boom, this appeared. It happened slowly, and I'm actually reading The Stand right now, and it's very much the same where it's different, where it's the flu is killing people, but it's happening slowly and it's trickling, and people aren't necessarily aware at first that it is what it is. The same sort of thing happens with this, where they're not like 100% convinced from day one that it's vampires. You know, things happen over time, and I love that there's discussions where they all get together and they go, maybe this is vampires. And they're like, yeah, maybe. And some people are doubtful, and some people are like really into it from the get-go. I just love that. I just think that it reads so accurate to small towns. I love that there's the ladies that gossip. I love that there's, you know, a family that's shitty and horrible people. I love just like the cops who are kind of not really doing much, and, you know, different characters that care and different ones that don't. And yeah, I just think it's great. It's really, really fun. I loved the scenes where they're finally sort of getting ready to battle the vampires as more and more people are turning into them, because slowly over time all the different town folks are turning into vampires. And so you get this sense of community from the very beginning of the book, and it sort of shifts, because as more and more of them are turning into vampires, the community shifts to where the people who you know and like are now battling against people that you knew and like, that you also know and like. So it's very fun. It's a lot of fun, and every part of this I could picture as a movie in my head. There is the adaptation, which I do need to watch, but it was so much fun, and I loved it. Like I mentioned earlier, I wasn't scared by this, but you know, it's vampires. It's fun. It's an accurate vampire book. It's not sparkly. It's not anything. It's just sort of like, you know, so it's just sort of creepy and fun. But yeah, I absolutely love this. If you're looking for a good vampire book and you want a nice slow build and you want to connect with the town, I love this. 10 out of 10. Do recommend. So far in my adult life, this is my favorite Stephen King work that I've read. I will talk about more that I've read, because I have read The Shining, I'm working on The Stand, and stuff like that. But this is the one that, you know, I'm very happy to have read and finished, and I adore this. I adore this. It was great. I loved it. So yeah, I don't really know what more to say about this. I will definitely watch the adaptation, and my next Stephen King Sunday is going to be me talking about the adaptation in comparison to this book, and so I will talk obviously more about the book when I can sort of relate it to a visual. I find that a little bit easier. I loved it, and I think you guys should read it if you want to. And yeah, it's a long book, but I read this so fast. Like, I sat down and read, I think, almost 400 pages in a day, because it was so good, and I wanted to know what was going on, and yeah. So, I do hope you guys like this video, and until my next one, I will talk to all of you soon. Bye!